MCAT 2017 Cram, Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, Passage 26. Does free will exist? As you view the reading of the passage, you'll notice some highlighted snippets of text. What I want you to do is garner meaning from these specific selections in order to answer the foundations of comprehension, reasoning beyond the text, and reasoning within the text questions that follow. Good luck and happy reading. Paragraph 1. Is there such a thing as free will? Perhaps the philosopher who has gotten closest to a sensible understanding of free will is Daniel C. Dennett, who thinks of the phenomenon as, quote, the power to veto meaning right to reject a decision, our urges, and then to veto our vetoes, the power of imagination, to see and imagine futures. Paragraph 2. Over the last few decades, science has made small but significant advances in understanding the relationship between conscious and unconscious thought, and the data are beginning to paint a picture that seems to validate Dennett's views. In the 1970s, Benjamin Libet wired people to an electroencephalogram and measured when they reported having a particular conscious thought about an action and when the nerve impulses corresponding to the initiation of an actual action started. The conscious awareness, in a sense, was a story that the higher cognitive parts of the brain told to account for the action. Paragraph 3. So science may be showing us that free will is more a feeling than a real manifestation of independent will. As psychologist Dan Wegner put it, quote, we see two tips of the iceberg, the thought and the action, and we draw a connection. Libet's position is a bit more moderate and is akin meaning of similar character, to Dennett's. Libet says that free will is a form of veto power, filtering and sometimes blocking decisions provisionally meaning subject to further confirmation for the time being, provisionally made at the unconscious level. Paragraph 4. Quantum mechanics is sometimes brought into discussions of free will by supporters of pseudoscience because it is very technical and, more important, incomprehensible. Incomprehensible meaning not able to be understood. Enough to lend that aura of scientific credibility without committing one to specific details. Some philosophers and scientists suggest that perhaps free will can be explained by occasional quantum fluctuations that, by interfering with subcellular phenomena in the brain, create a partial decoupling of our decision-making processes from the standard macroscopic laws of causality. This is nonsense, not only because we have absolutely no evidence of quantum fluctuations, whatever they are at the brain level, but because even if they did happen, they would at most generate random, not free will. And random will is not one of those varieties of free will that is, in Dennett's words, worth having. Paragraph 5. Another source of confusion between science and philosophy when it comes to free will is to be found in the rather vague concept of emergent properties. For example, the notion of free will being an emergent property of the higher brain's functions. Even though some scientists are predisposed to reject emergent properties, emergence can actually be studied scientifically and is a rather common phenomenon. For example, when hydrogen and oxygen combine to form water, the resulting molecule has emergent physical-chemical properties, in the sense that the temperatures marking transition states are not simple functions of the properties of the individual atoms. Paragraph 6. Some philosophers have argued that emergence restricts the limits of reductionism, not because it isn't physics all the way down, but because, frankly, a quantum mechanical description of, say, the Brooklyn Bridge isn't going to be very helpful. Emergence entails that certain phenomena are best studied and understood at some levels of analysis rather than others, and free will may well fall into this category. To say that it is an emergent property of the brain is not a call for magic or pseudoscience, just the realization that neurobiology and psychology are better positioned than quantum mechanics to understand it. All right, that's it. Based on the passage, which of the following elements of Dennett's characterization of free will correspond to what Lebesgue calls decisions provisionally made at the unconscious level? Is it A, urges, B, vetoes, C, vetoes of vetoes, or D, imagining futures? This may require you to go back to the text, but the answer is sort of obvious. I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, so this is basically a Foundations of Comprehension question, which wants you to be able to figure out the purpose of a specific phrase in the context of the entire passage. The author writes that Lebesgue's, quote, position is a bit more moderate and is akin to Dennett's. Lebesgue says that free will is a form of veto power, filtering and sometimes blocking decisions provisionally made at the unconscious level. In comparison, Dennett thinks of free will as the power to veto our urges and then veto our vetoes. This is mentioned in paragraph 1. Both Lebesgue and Dennett describe the use of the veto power, whereas Lebesgue describes vetoing, quote, decisions provisionally made at the unconscious level. This is mentioned in paragraph 3. Dennett describes vetoing urges and then overriding that veto. So there's a correspondence between provisional decisions and urges. Okay, so the correct answer choice is answer choice A. In contrast to decisions made at the unconscious level or urges, the power to veto our vetoes is asserted by Dennett in paragraph 1 to represent our free will. Both options B and C. The phenomenon of free will is also described as being the power to imagine futures, option D. So all the rest of the three options, B through D, hint at free will versus urges, which is decisions made at the unconscious level. All right. With which of the following statements about emergent properties does the passage information suggest that the passage author would most likely agree? Is it A, psychology is well positioned to study emergent properties of the functioning of the brain? Is it B, supporters of pseudoscience tend to favor detailed explanations of free will? Or is it C, free will is an emergent property that is decoupled from the standard macroscopic laws of causality? This may be a little difficult, but I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, so again, this is a Foundations of Comprehension question, and you have to figure out what this specific phrase means in the context of the central theme of the passage. So it's important to understand the thesis, examples, and counterexamples that the author offers up surrounding this phrase, okay? Okay, so the author describes emergent properties in paragraph 5 as those properties that are a function of higher ordered states and cannot be directly inferred from simply understanding the component parts. The example of emergent properties that is offered is of water having physical chemical properties that extend beyond the properties of the individual hydrogen and oxygen atoms, okay? So all of this is discussed towards the end of paragraph 5. The author writes that, quote, to say that it is an emergent property of the brain, just the realization that neurobiology and psychology are better positioned than quantum mechanics to understand it. This the author discusses in paragraph 6. Although the author doesn't state that all properties of the brain are best studied by psychology, but that some properties of the brain may be emergent and therefore lend themselves to being studied by psychology. So the best choice here is going to be A. The author suggests that, quote, quantum mechanics is sometimes brought into discussions of free will by supporters of pseudoscience because it's very technical and, more important, incomprehensible enough to lend that aura of scientific credibility without committing to one specific detail. You can find this mentioned in paragraph 4. In a later paragraph, the author asserts another source of confusion between science and philosophy when it comes to free will is to be found in the rather vague concept of, quote, emergent properties, okay? Again, found in paragraph 5. So if supporters of pseudoscience are motivated to adopt positions that are hard to pin down, the vagueness of this concept would basically lead supporters of pseudoscience to favor it, I guess. So the author doesn't talk about emergent properties being decoupled from the standard laws of causality. I don't even know what the heck this means. This sounds like some quantum mechanics or something. Okay, you get the point. The answer is A. Assume that the phenomenon of happiness resists being described through reductionism. Given this assumption, and based on the passage, which of the following statements is most likely to be true? Is it A, a description of the phenomenon of happiness can be given without referring to emergent properties? Is it B, a description of happiness requires referring to technical aspects of quantum mechanics? Or is it C, a description of happiness is more helpful in terms of psychology than in terms of physics? I think you know the answer to this one. I'll give you a moment to think. All right. This is a reasoning beyond the text question that basically wants you to apply the ideas expressed in the passage to these new situations, okay? Both in the question stem and the answer choices. The author believes that, quote, certain phenomena are best studied and understood at some levels of analysis rather than others. You can find this in paragraph 6. If happiness is resistant to being described through reductionism, then based on the passage, we can conclude that it is possible that, quote, neurobiology and psychology are better positioned than quantum mechanics to understand it, also found in paragraph 6. which supports answer choice C and refutes answer choice B, okay? As for answer choice A, if happiness resists being described through reductionism, then that is when the author suggests it may be better understood by referring to its emergent properties. The author does not suggest another alternative that would not refer to emergent properties when a reductionist approach doesn't work. So this is automatically wrong. And so basically, a description of happiness is more helpful in terms of psychology than in terms of physics. This is also like a common sense answer. You probably wouldn't even need the text to answer it, okay? All right. Suppose that a scientist were to demonstrate to the passage author that quantum fluctuations occur at the subcellular level of the brain. Based on the fourth paragraph, is the author's opinion that the quantum mechanical description of free will is nonsense likely to change? A, yes, because quantum fluctuations would have been clearly defined. B, yes, because quantum fluctuations would be subject to standard laws of causality. Or C, no, such fluctuations would still generate random will. I'll give you a moment to think. These questions are really difficult, just in case you're wondering. This is a more challenging piece in comparison to the others. All right. Okay, so in this second reasoning beyond the text question, you basically, again, have to apply the ideas in the passage to this new situation in the question stem. So if we go to paragraph 4, the author writes, this is nonsense, not only because we have absolutely no evidence of quantum fluctuations, whatever they are, at the brain level, but because even if they did happen, they would at most generate random, not free will. So basically, there goes our answer. He articulates that the notion that free will can be explained by quantum fluctuations is nonsense because even if quantum fluctuations do occur at the subcellular level of the brain, this would still generate some random will rather than free will. So proof that quantum fluctuations do occur, which would presumably also provide a definition for them, would not change his position. The author doesn't believe that quantum fluctuations could explain free will, even if they could be shown to occur at the brain level. So that means answer choice A and B are out, okay? And by default, the correct answer choice is answer choice C. His main argument is that quantum fluctuations, even if they did exist, would generate random will. All right? Okay.